What's going on? This is your man John Fortune, your host of the Frustrated Fan Sports Show, and on the dawn of Van Snyder being out as owner of the Washington franchise, something that has been long deserving for us as a fan base, something that no matter what goes on is going to be the best thing to ever happen to us. But again, this is one of those things that I can't say how happy I am, but we have to wait until the paperwork is done. Once the paperwork is done and it's been signed off and they introduce Josh Harris as the owner of the Commanders, or hell, I don't know, if they introduce anybody as the owner of the Commanders, we will finally be out of the hellhole that Dan Snyder created when it came to his ownership of the team. So to bring on to that, there's so many times people talk about, people hear us fans and they're like, but John, we don't understand. Like, what has he done to make him such a hated owner? You got to tell us why he's a hated owner. You guys can't just say that you hate him and then that's it, because that doesn't work for other franchises. People say they hate Jerry Jones all the time. They say they hated Al Davis for years, but nobody's able to do that. But I told him that there were several things that happened during his tenure that made him the worst owner possible. And today I do a top 10. Haven't done a top 10 in a while, but I'm doing one this time. The top 10 is going to be, and I'm only going to stick to football stuff, the top 10 things Dan Snyder did as an owner that ruined the franchise. Ruined this Washington franchise for a very long time. Now understand this, there are some things that, are things that some people will find that won't be on this list, that some people will be like, well, why that's not on the list? Like, example, the name change. The name change isn't going to be on the list because that was something that's going to happen no matter what. Even if he didn't own the franchise, it was going to happen because the NFL is trying their best to be a global league. And what's happening is that with a name like Redskins, it's just not going to work. And I understand that there are a ton of fans out there, a lot of fans out there that love the Redskins name, but it was still offensive. No matter how you look at it, it's no different if a team was called the N-words. Again, I don't even call people the N-word because I don't like saying it. So for me, it's one of those things where if it does genuinely offend somebody, then you have to go ahead and go about changing it. Not only that, understand that the name came from an owner who showed how racist and prejudiced he was. So again, sometimes to move forward and move ahead in your future, you have to get rid of the past. And to be quite honest, y'all, it was good. The name change was going to happen. I'm not going to focus on individual things like contracts. I mean, when I say that, I'm not going to focus on everything. Ain't going to be a simple contract. It's going to be things that led into that particular situation that helped or assisted in destroying the franchise. So with that being said, I'm going to start my top 10 things Dan Snyder did to ruin this Washington franchise and why he was hated and why all the fans are excited about him leaving. Number 10 is not reaching out to Trent Green. Now, for a lot of people, this is the beginning of our downfall at the quarterback position once Van Snyder bought the team. Trent Green, the previous year, had basically set up there and came in as the third quarterback and actually set up there and played very well in 1998. And at that point, everybody was on the cusp of like, okay, here we are. We actually have a guy who can play quarterback. We actually have a guy who's pretty good. We actually have a guy that is there And for some reason, Dan Snyder never reached out to him. Charlie Casserly never reached out to him. Nobody ever reached out to him to sit up there and kind of lock him in as the quarterback. Instead, guess what happened? He goes away, and then we end up in quarterback purgatory for God knows how long. And it just never worked out for us. I mean, no matter what happened, what went on, what was going on, what was happening, drafting, everything, we just could not get the quarterback position correct. And all of it started during Dan Snyder's tenure. Couldn't get the quarterback position correct, and a lot of it starts from him never reaching out to Trent Green to see if there was a chance that Trent Green would in fact come back to Washington. But again, his mind was somewhere else. His mind was on the fact of trying to find a big arm quarterback and everything like that. This is when we weren't sure what type of owner he was, but this was one of the things that at the beginning of his ownership was a disastrous mistake. Number 9, not promoting Gregg Williams to the head coaching job after Joe Gibbs retired. This was a bungle right here because, again, this was one of those situations where Dan wanted to be GM Dan, GM Fan Snyder, and he could not get out of his own way to help his team. And part of that was not promoting Gregg Williams to the head coaching job once Joe Gibbs retired. Every player on that team wanted Gregg Williams back. The offensive players wanted Gregg Williams back. The defensive players wanted Gregg Williams back. Everybody was intent on Gregg Williams coming back. And even a lot of us as fans, we were like, well, if Joe is going to retire, Gregg is right there. Promote Gregg. And instead, little man Dan's ego got in the way. Didn't want to sit up there and promote Gregg Williams because Gregg Williams wouldn't let him have his way. So in turn, he did not promote Gregg Williams. I mean, the team would have still been quite successful. They were just coming off of a playoff run. I mean, you would have kept some continuity there with Gregg Williams being promoted to the head coaching job. You would have kept the defense on the trajectory that it was. You probably would have had a better quarterbacking position, a quarterbacking situation, because then at that point, Jason Campbell would have had another year under that Al Saunders offense, and you would have had the ability to try your best to keep the continuity and the winning that was happening. Even though it wasn't much winning, it was still some winning. You would have been able to keep that consistency going. Instead, you sat up there, you went on, you let him go, and you went on, and who did you hire behind that? Jim Zorn. So that was number 9. Number 8 on the list, the 2002 draft and the 2002 free agency. Now, I don't know if a lot of y'all remember what happened in that particular draft. Well, when the free agency happened, that was right at the time that we just got Steve Spurrier, and then they wanted to bring in all the former Gators. Remember, it was like we had Riddell Anthony came in from Tampa Bay. Jaquez Green came in from Tampa Bay. They signed, I think it was Danny Warfel was here, Shane Matthews was here, and it was all about trying to build up, trying to bring back trying to make this team into the Washington Gators. And it just didn't work out because that was also the year that they Jeremiah Trotter signed on, and they also had Ronaldo Wynn come in. And for anybody who wasn't here at the time when we brought Jeremiah Trotter in, he was the worst. At the time, he was the worst free agent signing we had at that time. But again, that was just a disaster. The next part of the disaster was the 2002 draft, in which everybody had us taking Ed Reed as the safety out of Miami. Everything was saying we were taking Ed Reed. We had the 18th overall pick, traded out of the 18th overall pick, sat up there and traded out from 18 to 21. We traded with the Raiders. Got to 21. Ed Reed still had not come off the board. Still had not come off the board. Sat up there, traded back again from 21st all the way to 32nd. They miss Ed Reed. Ed Reed goes to the Ravens at, I think, 24. And we set up there and we draft Patrick Ramsey. And at that time was a draft of quarterbacks that everybody was sitting there like, there's only two guys at the top. And I think it was Joey Harrington and I can't think of a quarterback. It was Joey Harrington and somebody else that went number 1 overall. But those were the two quarterbacks that was in that draft. Nobody else in that draft was even considered a top quarterback. That includes Patrick Ramsey, who they took at the 32nd overall pick. And of course, guess what? Patrick Ramsey flames out, never recovers. And again, this was the beginning of us learning how GM Dan wanted to really play his cards, because GM Fan Snyder started to really get involved in a lot of the free agency, the drafting and everything like that. And he basically was just ruining the team at that point. Number 7, giving Ron Rivera full control. Now, I know a lot of y'all going to be like, John, Ron Rivera's still here. I'm going to tell y'all something. Like, Ron is what he is. He's not a winning head coach, and all this thing about culture change and all that type of stuff. Understand, just because you change the culture, but if you change the culture and you still getting the same results from changing the culture, how much of the culture has really changed? And not only that, Ron Rivera was not the coach you should have given full control to. Marty Schottenheimer, that was understandable. Mike Shanahan should have been given full control, but Ron Rivera was not the guy you give full control to. He just wasn't. He was coming off of losing season. Not only that, he had just lost his biggest game against Washington, and then you talk about he lost in the Super Bowl. Prior to that, he wasn't really on a winning trajectory. He ran into a schedule like he did just last year. He ran into a schedule that was very favorable for him, and he happened to make it to the Super Bowl. So again, Ron Rivera having full control, that was not the right move to happen. Because again, even with him having full control, we're still talking about things that did not happen correctly. He had full control, and already all the guys he drafted with having full control are all going to be up for new contracts during his tenure here. And the most he's given us as a fan base and the most he's given them as players is 7 wins. I mean, yeah, they went 8-1 last year, but let's be honest, that was really 7-10. So again, you're talking about, here we are, you're talking about giving the guy full control. He's supposed to be changing the culture, and yet guess what? He's now starting to understand the ability of changing the culture, because guess what? All he did was transfer the losing that he was having in Carolina. He transferred it right to Washington, because guess what he did? He brought everybody he knew in Carolina who was losing right along with him. He brought them all to Washington. And basically, why should we have been surprised that happened? When you sit up there and you bring all your baggage that was losing and stuff from your old place to your new place, why would you think that success was going to happen? It just wasn't. And that, my people, is why giving Ron Rivera full control was a disastrous thing. Number 6, and I only got 2 words for number 6, Champ Bailey. A lot of y'all are going to be like, Champ Bailey? Whoa, wait a minute, John. What? Fan Snyder, this impacted the franchise in a very major way. And I know some people may be like, oh, not really. No, it really did. And I'm going to tell you why. Let's start with it. All of this doesn't start with the trade. This starts with the contract. Now, I don't know how many of y'all remember, but remember when Champ was coming up for free agency, General Manager Fan Snyder sat up there and offered Champ a 9-year deal. Never had been given to a player ever before. Not only that, he gave him less money on the back end. Now, what was happening was that Champ was like, well, I only want a 5 or 6 year deal. I don't want a 9-year deal making less money, because even with that, remember, they also had to sign LeVar Arrington, and they signed LeVar Arrington to a massive contract. And they wanted to do the exact same thing with Champ Bailey, but Champ only wanted to sign a 6-year deal. And what ended up happening, in turn, that right there was the beginning of the collapse for our secondary, because what ends up happening, he goes off, he trades Champ Bailey to Denver. In comes Clinton Portis. Clinton Portis isn't quite the running back that you want him to be. Gets he's a steady running back, but he's injured a lot and things like that. Doesn't really produce like he was in Denver, because why? They asked him to do more pounding, which is what he wasn't asked to do when he was in Denver. So again, you're talking about that impacted the franchise. And yes, Shawn Springs came in. He was good, but he wasn't Champ Bailey great. And that is what happened with us. Not only that, Champ sits up there. Champ makes it to the Hall of Fame. They asked Champ, hey, well, who are you going in as? He said, I would have gone in as a Redskin, but no one reached out to me to congratulate me on making the Hall of Fame. So guess what? Now you're talking about a guy who could have been in the Hall of Fame under a Redskin helmet is in the Hall of Fame under a Denver helmet, because why? General Manager Van Snyder didn't even give him a call, gave him a crappy contract, traded him, basically didn't really have his franchise back to what it was. And understand this was at a time where Washington had the opportunity to have probably the most devastating secondary you could have ever imagined. Now understand this, with them keeping Champ Bailey, they could have still brought Shawn Springs in. Their secondary would have consisted of Shawn Springs on the right side. Yeah, Shawn Springs on the right side. Sean Taylor. And this would have been Joe Gibbs' first year as coach. So the secondary would have been Shawn Springs on the right side. Sean Taylor, because he didn't really start, but he would have been playing more if these things would have happened. Shawn Springs on the right side. Sean Taylor as the strong safety. Ed Reed as the free safety, because again, this goes back to the 2002 bungle. Then, and also Champ Bailey on the left side. That would have been Washington's secondary in Joe Gibbs' first year back in Washington. And boom, GM Van Snyder ruined it. Number 5, the 2003 free agency. The 2003 free agency ended up impacting the 2003 draft. And the reason that happened was because General Manager Van Snyder had this epiphany to just go get anybody that was a free agent from any successful team he can find. And this was when he plundered the Jets. Not only did he plunder the Jets, it was like Lavernius Coles. He had to give up first-round picks for Lavernius Coles. He had to give up picks for Chad Morton. He had to give up a pick for Matt Bowen. He had to give up a pick for defensive tackle out of Miami, Haley, from the Miami Dolphins. He gave up a rack of picks in 2003. Not only that, you're talking about at that time, that was an insane amount of guys to snatch from a team, because even with that, he took Randy Jordan, who was there, Randy Thomas, who was their free agent guard. The year before that, in 2002, he traded a 5th-round pick to the Jets for David Laverne. And he also signed their kicker, John Hall. And then there was another player that was supposed to come to us but went back to the Jets. Can't remember who the guy was. But again, that 2003 free agency where he signed all those restricted players and basically obliterated the 2003 draft. We ended up picking 3 players in that we only had 3 picks. Never really before seen in the draft. We had 3 picks in that 2003 draft. Those 3 picks, the first pick in the second round, we took Taylor Jacobs out of Florida. We took Derek Doherty out of, I think he came from Texas or Florida State. And we took Gilbert Hamden, the quarterback out of Toledo or Indiana. And I mean, just decimated the 2003 draft, which was actually a fairly good draft. In that, I mean, because that was the Byron Leftwich draft. You know, I mean, we could have had quarterbacks in that draft. And I mean, we just never had the opportunity to pick anybody from that draft. So again, his 2003 free agency, where he wanted to sign everybody's restricted free agent, because I think he also got 2 players from Dallas. I think he took Brandon Noble and Zellner from Dallas, and I think Zellner never really played for us. So again, like I said, it just keeps going down. Number 4, the Minions. Vinny Cerato, hiring his minions, Vinny Cerato and Bruce Allen. These guys were just basically yes men. And I don't know how many of y'all watch wrestling, but back in the day, wrestling, there was a point where Vince McMahon became one of the big figures in wrestling. And he had 2 guys who was with him, Gerald Briscoe and Pat Patterson. And Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe was basically just Vince McMahon's yes man. Everything he did was yes. No matter how stupid it was, no matter how dumb it was, no matter how crazy of an idea it was, they just went with him. And these 2, Bruce Allen and Vinny Cerato, basically did the exact same thing. They were nothing more than minions of the GM Fan Snyder. And it just became a disaster as it went on and on and on. No matter what was going on, no matter what was happening, no matter what was being done, all we saw was disaster after disaster after disaster. And I mean, you're talking about from all the crazy signings that happened, all the craziness that was going on. I mean, even when it came to Bruce, all the insane stuff that was going on with him. And all that happened was that both of these guys just did nothing. They didn't do anything to tame the owner. Like, they didn't try to talk to him. They didn't try to talk him out of stuff. They just went with everything. No matter what it was, no matter how stupid it was, no matter how dumb it was, nothing. They basically was the Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe to GM Fan Snyder's Vince McMahon. And because of that, that's number 4. Number 3. Albert HAYNESWORTH'S contract. Now, the reason this is on the list is because signing Albert HAYNESWORTH also runs into my number 2 situation. But again, the signing of Albert HAYNESWORTH created a bigger problem. I think it was in 2011 or 2012, where we got that massive cap hit. And it was like $36 million on the cap, and we were not able to sign quality free agents that year. All because they wanted to get from up under the Albert HAYNESWORTH contract, gave him a huge chunk of cash in $21 million. And next thing you know, bam, Washington got hit with that huge cap hit. And even with that, Albert HAYNESWORTH never became the player that you wanted him to be. He was the first $100 million defensive lineman, and he just never turned out to be what he was. Now, were they playing him right? Probably not, but again, you shouldn't be signing a guy before your coach gets here. And they signed him, and next thing you know, he just wasn't what they wanted him to be. He wasn't a nose tackle. He was a Russian tackle. He was a Russian defensive tackle, and they just never utilized him in that manner. He played lazy. He didn't really want to play. You could tell he didn't want to play. And like I said, when Mike Shanahan wanted to get from up under him, they gave him that money, and next thing you know, Wayne Murr, I think it was Wayne Murr, I don't think it was John Murr, I think it was Wayne Murr, who sat up there and cried and complained, and we got that $38 million cap hit. Devastated the team after that, man. We never recovered from that, and it kept going downhill. And the Albert Haynesworth situation leads me into number 2, getting in Mike Shanahan's way. Mike Shanahan knew what he was doing. I remember I praised Mike Shanahan for holding off on drafting a quarterback in 2011 once Cam Newton was gone. You know, I mean, and we all knew that. We all knew Mike Shanahan was lying about the whole thing about, you know, believing in Rex and John Beck, because we knew he didn't believe in these guys. But he also understood that beyond Cam Newton, there were no other quarterbacks in that 2011 draft worth drafting. And I could appreciate that. But then sitting up there in 2012 and getting in the way of Mike Shanahan, especially when he's siding with Robert Griffin III, like, that made no sense. And not only that, undermining Mike every moment he got an opportunity to. Should have been with the Clinton Porter situation or any other type of situation that happened. It was just always getting in Mike Shanahan's way. I mean, even to the point where he fired, I think he fired Matt LaFleur. I think he fired Matt LaFleur just to prove a point to Mike Shanahan, and it just went downhill, man. I mean, they were just, like I said, General Manager Van Snyder was just constantly in the way of Mike Shanahan. And I mean, even with that, Mike Shanahan had actually given us a lot of pieces that was going to be something special. I mean, he was the one who drafted Trent Williams. He was the one who drafted Morgan Moses. He brought in a lot of guys that were big time players for us. He actually had the team on the right path. And General Manager Van Snyder just wanted to get in the way of it and just sat up there and actually collapsed the team. Last but not least, number 1, and I'm pretty sure all of y'all feel the same way about this number 1, and that's firing Marty Schottenheimer. Marty Schottenheimer came in after the silliness that he did with North Turner. And Marty Schottenheimer came in. Marty had full control, knew what he was doing. The team didn't look that sharp at the beginning, but they recovered and ended up going 8-8. We saw the team making a change. We saw the culture change when Marty Schottenheimer was here. We saw what this team was going to be and what it was going to become. And what happened? Van Snyder gets in the way, asked Marty Schottenheimer to relinquish some of his power, and Marty Schottenheimer in return says, nope, I'm not relinquishing anything. And General Manager Van Snyder had to release him. Oh, man. Hopefully that helped a lot of y'all with y'all questions on why the fan base hated Dan Snyder, why the fan base did not like him, why the fan base felt that he was such a disaster for this team. Hopefully my top 10 helped you out with that. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Do y'all think that the fan base had a fair assessment in it? For y'all who are fans of the channel, y'all tell me, what things do y'all feel should have been added to the list? Other than that, this has been your man John Fortune, and this has been the Frustrated Fan Sports Show.